These talks between Ukraine and Russia are now over, and they did not go well because, at the end of the day, Russia threatened Ukraine again with a list of demands. The biggest one being that, hey, do you know those territories we illegally occupy and don't really have fully in our control, and you guys have some of that? It's time for you guys to withdraw now. If not, those 4 territories that still have some kind of land that you have, that could become 5, referring to taking parts of Kharkiv. That is where we're at this very moment. It was a less than a 2-hour-long meeting in which Russia just made a list of demands and there was no ceasefire. So I figured, let's quickly go over the meeting in a short little video, explain to you what happened, and then from there give you the reactions from world leaders. This meeting did just end about an hour and a half ago, so we're still waiting for Donald Trump to make announcements, but he did have a conversation with other world leaders. Let's back up for a second. For those who don't know, there were talks between Ukraine and Russia inside of Istanbul. It lasted less than 2 hours, and it ended with no agreement on a 30-day ceasefire, Moscow demanding that Ukraine leave from 4 different oblasts, and that Vladimir Putin really is not really setting up any kind of meeting with Zelensky at this very moment.
The Russian delegation probably has limited mandate because our delegation was ready to have a ceasefire agreed today. The Russian delegation was probably not in such a detail on the ceasefire, but I think this discussion about the ceasefire will continue, and we will continue to press for a ceasefire.
The third objective was our president was expecting the high-level discussions in here, and I think the next step would be that the leaders-level meeting should be organized, and that would be our next step.
So nothing was accomplished. There was one little surprise, though, which was they agreed to a 1,000 to 1,000 prisoner swap. In these past few months, we've seen Ukraine and Russia do these swaps. This would be obviously the largest ever, but it's nothing that was really like, oh wow, Russia really wants peace. No. Once again, Russia demanded that Ukraine leave the other 4 regions. Remember that Russia does have 5 different regions in their control. You've got Crimea being one region. The other 4, they have partial control over territories. We're talking about Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Luhansk, and Donetsk. There's different sections in which Ukraine has in their control, and Russia during this meeting just straight up said, we want you to vacate now. It's time for you to essentially surrender that land to us. Which is just like, wait a minute, what? We're not going to fully withdraw from land that is ours. Why would we do that? That's just a surrender. That's not like a peace negotiation. But Russia stood their ground saying, no, you need to do this. And Ukraine said, no, we're not. That's ridiculous. And so, while we don't know the exact words, according to the Ukrainian sources here, they said that Russia themselves, the Russians there, really did not have any authority whatsoever to negotiate. Instead, these people need to take everything that was said during that meeting all the way back to Russia to meet with Putin again to discuss what was said, and then meet with Ukraine again to have a conversation in which, I can't say this enough, if Vladimir Putin actually showed up, I'm sure that today we probably would have had some kind of major step towards peace. But we did not. That's the bottom line. There was not. Obviously, once again, it did end with that 1,000 for 1,000 transfer of POWs, which is always great, especially because Ukrainian lives, it's so important we get them back. But I really don't see this as any kind of real major breakthrough when it comes to conversations. I know that earlier today, Donald Trump did state, and Marco Rubio as well, that the only way peace is going to happen is if Donald Trump meets with Putin.
The only way we're going to have a breakthrough here, nothing's going to happen at this point. Given everything we know after months of working on this, nothing's going to happen until President Trump sits across the table from Vladimir Putin.
And I really don't want to see that. The reason why is because that's rewarding Putin. Putin has been like begging for an audience with Donald Trump, and Rubio said from day one, we're not going to let those two meet until there's been progress. Well, we tried diplomacy. That didn't work. We tried to do this whole thing with the ceasefire, and Well, that doesn't seem like that's working. So I guess unfortunately we're now at that step where Donald Trump is going to have to meet with Putin, hopefully not in Russia, and hopefully he's not coming here to the U.S. Because if he is, I'll be the first one outside with like an FU kind of banner outside the White House to Vladimir Putin, because I think that would be extremely necessary. So where does this lead us? Well, we saw Zelenskyy take to social media. About an hour and a half later, he, remember, is in a world summit with other world leaders. And so it just so happens he was there with Merz and Starmer and Macron and Tusk and Maloney and a couple other world leaders. And so he said online, I spoke with Donald Trump, together with President Macron, the Chancellor Merz, Prime Minister Starmer, and Tusk. We discussed the meeting in Istanbul, where legitimately, from the photos we've seen online, it almost seems like all of them got together and put a phone in speakerphone and were talking to Donald Trump directly to tell them what exactly had happened. And, I mean, from the photos, it really does look like that, which is kind of interesting. He says here, Ukraine is ready to take the fastest possible steps to bring real peace. And it's important that the world holds a strong stance. Now, Ukraine, once again, they went in there with two objectives: a ceasefire immediately and a meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy. He says, our position, if the Russians reject a full and unconditional ceasefire and the end of the killings, is tough sanctions must follow. Pressure on Russia must be maintained until Russia is ready to end the war. Thank you to everyone in the world who is helping. Remember, there is right now the 17th massive sanction package on the table that's being put out there. And now we just got to wait for this to kind of get pushed through and see if it causes any pressure onto Russia. I don't know. This is going after banks and other institutions and the Black Shadow Fleet. So, you know, there's a lot here that you got to look at and hope that those sanctions do something. Now, Zelenskyy did say something a little bit earlier, which I thought was quite clever. He says, I addressed the European Political Community Summit this week. We had a real chance to move towards ending the war if only Putin hadn't been afraid to come to Turkey. I was there ready for a direct meeting with him to resolve key issues. He didn't agree to anything. And he's not wrong here. I think Vladimir Putin is really scared to meet with him one-on-one, which is why Donald Trump had from the get-go said, hey, what if I go? I could be that additional person there, though the Russians in this meeting, literally before the meeting, said, we don't want U.S. delegation inside. We don't want them near this at all, because I'm sure that, I'm sure what the Russians were going to say would really piss off the Americans. And so that's why they said that. Which, speaking about pissing people off, during the meeting, according to information that comes out now, remember that Ukrainians, for the most part, most of them do speak Russian. But they purposely spoke to the Russians through a translator to send a message. Hey, we're not speaking your language because we're not doing that here. We're not coming to your level. You're coming to our level. And everything we're saying to you is going to come through a translator. It was kind of smacking the face of the Russians, which was quite clever. I thought that was kind of funny. Now it comes to world leaders. We did get world leaders respond to this, and they're all pretty much the same thing. Like we look at Maloney. She emphasized the need for a ceasefire and security guarantees for Ukraine by adding, quote, it has become clear who really wants peace and who does not. The German chancellor said in a statement that, well, Russia themselves are disrupting peace negotiations and criticized Russia for the lack of progress in them. Once again, how about you send them some Tauruses, which today we find out that it looks like they're not going to. UK Starmer said that Putin's trying to drag out the ceasefire and that London will not allow this. Then he emphasized full support for Ukraine and called the Russia position negotiations as unacceptable. France's Macron accused Russia of ignoring demands of the United States, Ukraine, and Europe, which is true. On Monday, remember, a ceasefire or sanctions. Russia said, let's just talk. There needs to be sanctions. That's the bottom line here. He does say that Moscow has not given an answer regarding the ceasefire, nor has it agreed to meet with real agreements. True. Then we saw, the final one here, Tusk, who said that Russia disrupted negotiations because the Kremlin refused to hold a dialogue with the participation of the United States, and again put forward unacceptable conditions. So yeah, this was not a good meeting. And I know that the Russians are spinning this, saying that, oh yes, this was a very acceptable, satisfactory meeting. But no, this wasn't. There is nothing accomplished here. No lives are being saved. No ceasefire. Russia is still hammering away on Ukraine every single minute. We saw civilians die yesterday. We saw more drones in the sky. Actually, last night was the first time in a while we didn't see a ballistic missile, I'll tell you that. But there really was nothing. And on a complete side note, Ukraine had attacked several depots last night, destroying them, which is awesome. But unfortunately, in the process of Russia sending their drones into Ukraine, Ukraine lost an F-16. According to the report, the Ukrainian pilot had just downed his third air target. He was going towards his fourth using the cannon on the F-16 Fighting Falcon when something happened. I don't know what. No one knows what. They haven't really told us exactly what happened, except for the fact that he lost contact with his team on the ground. Turns out something happened to the aircraft. He had to eject. He parachuted down. He is safe, but an F-16 is now lost. And that's a major problem since Ukraine really doesn't have many of these F-16s, and to lose just even one is a problem. And I believe that this might be the third one they've lost since they've gotten them. They are older platforms. I think these ones are from the 80s. So yeah, these are a little bit older aircraft, so I'm unsure if something had happened to the aircraft or if it was pilot error. And that's the latest we have for you right now. I know we're still waiting on Donald Trump, and before I stop recording this video, I will double check. And he has not put anything online when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. I do believe, though, he wants to meet with Putin. I think he's got no other option now because everything else is not working. I just hope that he stands firm that Russia needs a ceasefire this very second, because Russia doesn't see that. But I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. So if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn on notifications, and give this video a thumbs up. I'm Joe, everyone. Stay safe.